am pleased to introduce our 2015 commencement speaker, U.S. Secretary of Labor, Thomas E. Perez. Secretary Perez was nominated by President Barack Obama and sworn in on July 23, 2013. As Secretary of Labor, Secretary Perez is committed to making good on the promise of opportunity for all, for giving every working family a chance to get ahead, and putting a middle-class life within reach of everyone willing to work for it. Secretary Perez received his undergraduate degree from Brown University, a Master of Public Policy degree from the John F. Kennedy School of Government, and his law degree from Harvard. He has worked in public service throughout his career. He was an advisor to Senator Ted Kennedy, the director of the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a law professor at the University of Maryland School of Law, a member of the County Council for Montgomery County in Maryland, and Secretary of Labor, Licensing, and Regulation in Maryland. Prior to serving as Secretary of Labor, he was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. And on top of all of that, he is the nephew of Father Staudenmeier, Assistant to President Garibaldi for Mission and Identity. Secretary Perez's career models the core values of working for justice and service to others that we seek to instill in each of our graduates. As we celebrate our graduates' achievements today, I encourage all of us to reflect on the message that Secretary Perez will deliver. And as a quick note, Secretary Perez will be leaving us following his remarks. He has to return immediately to Washington, D.C. to continue his service for our country. Please join me in welcoming U.S. Secretary of Labor, Thomas Perez.
Good evening, and congratulations. It's an honor to be here. Dean Crocker, President Garibaldi, Provost Sarkowski, students, parents, faculty, and everyone in this community. It's a true honor to be here. Congratulations on your 50th anniversary. As a trial lawyer by training, I look at an audience, and I look up there. I believe that the University of Detroit men's basketball team was in the NCAA tournament in 1962. Which meant that when you all were here, they had a pretty good team. Now, I don't know if Dickie V was here back then. He might be a little too young to have been there, but I know that what he would be saying about all these graduates tonight is that they are all prime-time players, except he'd be talking like this. So, congratulations. And I also want to offer a very specific congratulations to Iyad, who I had the privilege of meeting earlier tonight. Thank you for representing your classmates on this program. You embody the best of the University of Detroit Mercy, a son of immigrants, first in your family to attend college. You epitomize all of the values of this school. So as Dickie V again would say, you got game. And so it's an honor to meet you tonight. And it's also, as someone who went to Catholic grammar school, trained by the nuns, followed by Jesuit high school, trained by the Jesuits, followed by getting married. He didn't say this, but my Uncle John there married my wife and me. And so this is a very, very special day to be here. And I was on the plane coming here today, and I was trying to figure out who spoke at the graduations I attended. And I had two responses to that. Number one, I had no idea. And number two, I had no idea what they said. And so it made me think, I need to think of something good to say. And so I was trying to think of a few, glitchy things to say. And I thought, you should remember that the world is your oyster. And then I remembered I'm allergic to oysters, so I didn't want to talk about that. Then I thought about talking about the keys to success. And then I realized I had lost my keys this morning, so that was a very tense morning. So I needed to think of something new. And what I also realized is that because you're here today, you don't really need a lecture on the keys to success because you've made it. and today is a product of the remarkable work that you have done and your colleagues have done. And I must take a moment to thank your faculty. As a former law school faculty member, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to all of your faculty, because none of them are getting rich. Or if they are, you need to call the Inspector General. And you know why they're doing this year after year? Because the non-monetary rewards are priceless. Because watching you graduate is indeed priceless to all of them, as it was to me. And I want to talk about something that I predict or bet is not on your resumes, because you're all trained to put your resume out there and talk about all the great things you have done, and there are many great things you have done. But I'd like to talk to you about, for me, the moments that are actually the most formative moments and things that are probably the most important thing. And what that is I would like to talk to you about the importance of failure. Now, you're wondering, he should have thought of the keys to success instead. But I hope you'll bear with me, because I'd like to talk about failure, and I'd also like to talk about the fierce urgency of now, and I'd like to talk about justice and responsibility, because I can't attend an institution like UDM and not talk a little bit about justice and responsibility. Now, you've all completed your courses, torts and business, corporations, and all of those things, and that's a remarkable thing. And I want to quote somebody right now who it's probably not a good idea to quote in the city of Detroit, and so you'll have to bear with me, and I apologize in advance. But this scholar named Michael Jordan once said, "I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the winning shot, and I've missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." And I know that there's a few people who probably wanted him to fail a little bit more during that playoff series, but we won't get into that. But the point here is that life is more than simply the search for knowledge that you have obtained in your journey here at UDM. It's also the search for wisdom. And I know in my life I've encountered people who have breathtaking knowledge about the law or economics, but they really don't have a lot of wisdom. And wisdom is something that you obtain, and I believe I have obtained by refusing to play it safe. It comes from embracing life, its setbacks. It comes from taking risk. It comes from attending another school, the School of Hard Knocks. And it comes from learning about those experiences. And one of the reasons why I like coming to schools like UDM is because you have so many life experiences. And it is those life experiences that will indeed hold you in best stead, because we're more than the sum of the exams that we have taken, and the resumes are wonderful, but they don't talk about the experiences that you really have. And I'm here to tell you that the most important and formative professional experience of my career was what some people might call a failure. Because if you look at my bio and all that, and I appreciate the kind words from the dean, but the bio doesn't tell you one story about me. And that is that in 2006, I served on the Montgomery County Council, and I decided to run for the Maryland Attorney General, statewide office. And we were on a roll, or so I thought. It was a 3-person race, and the Democratic primary is kind of the whole shooting match in Maryland, or at least at the time. And about 2 weeks before the election, we had done some polling, and the polling showed a dead heat with the 3 candidates. And I was thrilled, because my principal opponent had been on the air already for about a month, because he had more money than I did. But we had a ground game, and we had a plan, and we knew we were going to win. And there was this legal proceeding that had been filed, and we thought it was a nuisance lawsuit challenging my eligibility to be on the ballot for reasons that I won't bore you with. And we had done our homework on that. We'd gotten advisory opinion that everything was fine. And here I was. I remember 10 days before the election, I remember where I was. I was in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and my phone rang. And it was a friend of mine and said, "Tom, did you hear what happened?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And he said, "You just got thrown off the ballot." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You just got thrown off the ballot." And I said, "Oh, well, I won't tell you what I said at that point." And you know what? I was going 60 miles an hour, and I hit a brick wall. And, it was a very public brick wall. A1 of the Baltimore Sun the next day. Lawyer doesn't know how to read Maryland Constitution. It wasn't very nice. We had worked so hard. We had gotten so many supporters. We thought we were on a roll. And here we go, and we hit a brick wall. And I thought I had, a variant of, PTSD for a few weeks afterward because it was a traumatic experience. And yet, as I reflect back on that experience, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because, like my mother taught me, when doors close, windows open. And but for that, I would not have been named Maryland Secretary of Labor, and but for that, I would not have been named the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and but for that, I might not have been named Labor Secretary. So the folks who organized this opposition and this lawsuit, I owe a debt of gratitude to them. I didn't quite think that day. But, when you think about some of the most successful people on the planet, they've had a similar glide path. This guy named Steve Jobs, you may have heard of him. He founded this small company out of his garage with a buddy when he was 20 years old. And 10 years later, he got pushed out of the company. He got thrown out. And you should hear him talk about that experience in his biography, in his autobiography. He calls that experience the most formative experience of his lifetime. And, there's this guy named Barack Obama. He ran for Congress once. He got his butt kicked. I mean, it wasn't close. There's an author. She wrote a couple books that you may have heard of. They're called Harry Potter. Her name is J.K. Rowling. When she wrote those books, she was on public assistance. She had 7 or 8 editors who read those books and said they're not good enough. They all deny it today, but they said it back then. I'd like to have a chat with them and say, you kind of got that one wrong. But as she reflected later on, she said, you will never truly know yourself or the strength of your relationships until both have been tested by adversity. And so the list goes on. George W. Bush ran and lost. Bill Clinton one year became the nation's youngest governor. And 2 years later, he became the nation's youngest ex-governor. And I think he did okay. And so, I've really grown to conclude that the only real failures in life are the failure to try, or at least the failure to learn from your experience. So I'm here to tell you that if you ever interview with me, one of my first questions is going to be, tell me about when you got kicked in the gut, and what did you do about it? And how did you learn from it? And what are you going to do in the future? Because it's the wisdom you get from those experiences. It's the wisdom you get from embracing the diversity that is Detroit, the diversity that is your community here. It's that wisdom that will serve you as well, or perhaps even better, than the knowledge you get from many of the classes you take. No disrespect to any of your professors. And sometimes adversity is professional, and sometimes it is personal. And that's my segue, to my second point, which is the fierce urgency of now. I'm the youngest of 5. My parents came here from the Dominican Republic to escape a brutal dictator. They had spoken out and were declared non grata, as we say in the business. And they ultimately settled in Buffalo, New York, because the weather was very similar to the Dominican Republic. And I was the youngest of 5, and I was 12 years old when my dad died. If you had told us on January 1, 1974, that one of our parents would die, we would have all said my mother, because she had chronic health issues. She had major surgery February or March that year, and she was just getting better when my dad had his first heart attack on Easter Sunday of 1974. And then shortly after he passed away in June of 1974, my mother got sick again, and she was in the hospital. And my brother said to me, and my sister said to me, don't worry, she's fine. And I said, when our father was in the hospital, you told me he was fine too. And, fooled you once, shame on you. Fooled you twice, shame on me. And I remember, reflecting that summer, and one of my least favorite assignments in school every year thereafter was, what did you do on your summer vacation? Because I didn't like that assignment. And, I remember thinking, we need to plow through this. And, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I remember thinking, if we can just get through this, I kind of made a deal with God. And I said, if we can get through this, I'm going to make sure I live every day with that fierce urgency of now. I don't think I used those words back when I was 12, but I came to realize that that's what I was meaning. And the good news is that my mother ended up living another 30 years. She started college the same year I started college. She graduated from college the same year I graduated from graduate school. She taught me that learning was lifelong. And she taught me about the fierce urgency of now. And that's why I live every single day with a fierce sense of urgency. There are 623 days till the weekend. That's what I tell my staff every day. January 20th, 2017, in 623 days, I turned into a pumpkin. And you know what? There is not a day to waste. 623 days till the weekend, and I urge you to live the same way, because my father did not wake up on June 29th, 1974, intending to die. I am certain of that. But things happen. And you know what? That's why you can't wait to do tomorrow what you need to do today, because, you know, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today is a gift, and that is indeed why we call it the present. And you need to live the present with that fierce sense of urgency. Just in the last 3 days, I spent time with farm workers in Fresno who are suffering terribly from the drought in California. And then I came back and I spent time in West Baltimore, an area I spent a lot of time in as the clinic director in Maryland, talking to young people, so many of whom seem to have lost hope. And we're taking a moment in time, a tragic moment, and we're turning it into a movement. And we're living every day there with a fierce urgency of now. And that is what I urge you to do, because there are so many challenges. There are so many needs. And the assignment I used to give to my students the second last day of class was I used to ask them to write their own obituary. And now that seems a little odd, but you know why I did that? Because I wanted them to reflect on why they were put on the planet Earth. Too many people go through law school just kind of sliding by, and they went there because it was the default option. I don't want it to be your default option. I want you to live every day with that fierce urgency of now. And periodically, I still hear from former students who say, you know, I still have my obituary. And I never met anyone who wrote on their obituary, you know, I'm Joe Jones, and, you know, I got an A in torts. And I mean no disrespect to your torts professors. But what they're doing, and what I was trying to do, was get you to think about what you can do with your life and make sure that you are involved. There's so many opportunities, and that brings me to my final set of observations. Justice and responsibility. That's what you're taught here at UDM. You've been so prepared for it. The first thing I do when I think about where to speak or an opportunity to speak is I look at your vision statement. And your vision statement is profound. It says that the university will be, quote, distinguished by graduates who lead and serve in the communities. And UDM has prepared you to do that with extraordinary clinical programs. And as a former clinic director, the first thing I did when I was looking you up was I was looking at all the clinical offerings. And you do great work, and I am so glad that you were the first law school to require a clinic as a condition of graduation. Those will change your lives, and as they changed our students' lives. And so you have been well prepared to live a life with justice and responsibility. And as I reflect on our moment in time, you are graduating at a remarkable moment in our nation's history and in our city of Detroit's history, because we're coming out of the greatest recession of our lifetime. One of the reasons I was late here is that today is what we call Numbers Day. It's when we release the job numbers for the last month. And we've had 62 consecutive months of private sector job growth to the tune of 12.3 million jobs. That's great work, and that is a wind at our back. But you know what? Those data are irrelevant to the farm workers in Fresno. Those data are irrelevant to those young men that I spoke to in Baltimore City, for whom opportunity remains elusive. Zip code should never determine destiny in this country. And the city I have spent the most time in this job is the city of Detroit, because you have a remarkable opportunity here. As a result of the intervention of the entire community, lawyers, community activists, remarkable judges, leaders across the board, this city has written a remarkable chapter. You've been written off so many times by so many people. But I'll tell you, this president didn't write you off. When people said, let the auto industry die, the president said, hell no. I'm sorry to say that at a UDM. He said, heck no. And you know what? The auto industry is roaring back. And I had the privilege of being here at a Ford plant with the president a few months back. When people said, now, let them go bankrupt, they will go under. No way, said the city of Detroit. And as a result of your interventions, your involvement, the involvement and leadership of lawyers and community members and others, justice is indeed being served. Pensions that we thought would get 0 cents on a dollar got recovery. Dignity was returned, and this city is back. This city's got mojo. This city's got a great future. And the historians will write about this chapter and talk about the resilience of Detroit. People who say you were going to die, I say you don't know, you know what, from Shinola. And by the way, I've toured Shinola, Shinola.com. I can't afford their watches because my wife's a legal aid lawyer and I've been in public service, but someday I'll buy one. And I got to tell you, you may be thinking, well, this is fine and dandy, but what is my role in justice and responsibility? And I leave you with the words of a guy that I got to know in the course of my job. His name is Randy Lewis. Randy was a former senior executive at Walgreens. And Randy is also the proud father of a son, and he has had the privilege of raising his son who has autism. And when Randy watched his son grow up, he understood that his son had remarkable gifts and talents. And so what Randy did was he went to his senior leadership at Walgreens and said, you know what, I want to transform our business model. I want to demonstrate to the world that we too often focus on the first 3 letters of the word disability and not enough on the last 7 letters. And so what Randy did was he put in place a program where people with disabilities were fully integrated into the workplace of Walgreens. And I visited one of their distribution centers in Connecticut, where they distribute products from Maine to Baltimore. And literally 40% of their workforce, people with disabilities, working side by side with everyone else. And that is the most productive plant in the country. And he demonstrated that. And he said, Tom, I'm from the corporate sector. You've been in public service. We play different instruments, but we are indeed in the same orchestra. And that is so true, because you are joining an orchestra. It's an orchestra of opportunity. There are so many opportunities to make a difference. You can play so many different instruments, and you should never fear changing instruments. And if that instrument isn't working for you, that is not failure. You will simply learn to play another instrument. But make sure you are in that orchestra. And quite frankly, I hope you play in the orchestra of Detroit, because the biggest lament of my parents' generation in Buffalo is that too many of those kids left because we didn't have opportunity. Opportunity is back here in Detroit. And I want to see you play the orchestra here, because it's a very important orchestra. St. Ignatius said, teach us to give and not to count the cost. My parents taught me, and this is a first cousin of what Shirley Chisholm said, if you want to get to heaven, you better have letters of reference from poor people. And you know what? When you join that orchestra, you're going to maximize the chances of that. And when you join that orchestra, I guarantee you, you may not get rich, but I guarantee you, as your faculty has learned, as so many other leaders in this city have learned, as I have had the privilege of learning, the non-monetary rewards are indeed priceless. So let's play that instrument with abandon, with the fierce urgency of now. Let's continue not only to build a resurgent Detroit, but to build a resurgent America, an America in which zip code never determines destiny, an America in which we have ladders of opportunity for everyone, not escalators, no free rides, but ladders for people who want to climb them. You need to help, because you know what? When that ladder is down, that ladder is exciting. And we all succeed when we all succeed. And we sit here in a basketball court. And you know what? America works best when we field a full team. So help us field that team by joining the Orchestra of Opportunity. Thank you so much.